So essentially, what we have are large institutions holding quite a large number of men. So at Harmondsworth, it's over 600 men in what is most easily described as prison-like conditions. That's the kind of image that these centres are.
And the mood in those centres, what is that like?
Well, it can vary very greatly, and I know obviously following the protest last night, obviously the mood probably today is one where there's lots of fear, lots of anxiety. But in my experience, an overwhelming feeling is actually one of stress. You're holding individuals who don't really have a sense of control over their own future. They're very much at the hands of the government, of the Home Office. And they have no real way of taking any of that control back. So it's a great deal of stress. And when there are 600 people who are under those stressful conditions, that gathers, and there are times where things do rise up, and that stress increases, especially when there are greater pressures on the system. I think that there definitely is likely a knock-on effect from the things that we see in Manston. These things don't happen in a bubble. So that tense, that stress across the detention estate will be felt in these centres.
So what you're saying, are you surprised that something like this happened?
So I don't know the exact details of what happened yesterday, and I've not been in direct contact with anybody who was involved, but these men who are in these centres have very little agency and very little control. The fact that when they try and raise issues in the past and they aren't heard, or they don't feel that they're listened to, the fact that kind of protests and demonstrations happen aren't unusual, as they aren't unusual in the rest of democratic society. When people feel that they are not listened to, demonstrations and protests are one way that people can raise their communal voice. The fact that this was triggered by an electricity outage, may seem surprising to us on the outside, but when you look at the bigger picture, these are men in very, very stressful situations, as I've said, who you're then taking away power. There's been no heating for 24 hours. The food provision has been cut off. So what may seem like a very, very small incident to us, a power outage, what's that? But actually, when you're in this wider situation, something like that can have a huge impact on the men there. And it's not just the conditions. If you have no electricity, you have no ability to charge your phone. The sole thing that you have as a person in detention to keep contact with the outside world, with your lawyer, with specialist agencies. So it's a much bigger problem.
Well, we've heard from one government minister. He said it's a bit of a cheek for illegal immigrants to complain about conditions. What would you say to that?
I think we have to be really, really careful about the words that we use and the rhetoric when we talk about anything to do with migration, and especially people in power should know the weight that their words hold. Comments like that, I think, just show the complete disregard for basic human dignity that there is amongst some people towards people who are ultimately coming to the UK to try and reach safety. I would hesitate to think what would happen if the ministers were in the position where they had to flee, where they were seeking safety from another country and were subjected to such conditions as we've seen from the horrendous reports at Manston. If the shoe was on the other foot, how would he feel at being treated like that? And the derision and the kind of distancing and othering of that type of language, it's really dangerous. And I think that type of language is a absolute trigger for the acts that we've seen down in Dover.
OK, well, thank you, William Neal, for speaking to us live on BBC News.